You're listening to the International Moving Podcast, your guide to moving to another country, brought to you by SDC International Shipping, LA's finest. An international move is exciting. It's a time to start over, establish a new business maybe, reestablish family ties, or retire where your budget will do more for you. Please enjoy today's episode, and if you have any questions about your international move, give us a call at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962. All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Jim. You're listening to the International Moving Podcast. After a little bit of thought, I decided that I was going to name today's episode Coming Home, Why Expats Return to the U.S. So we've talked quite a bit about what it's like to be an expat, what different countries are like. We talk about moving different types of items, the shipping process itself, what goes into it. We cover a lot of topics in this podcast, in our blog articles. But I did think the other day, after hearing one woman's experience in living in the country of Mexico and why she decided to return back, that yes, I have heard over the years stories of people who, after having lived in another country for a period of time, have decided to move back. And as I've said many times before, there's different reasons that people move. Some people move for just a new experience and some adventure, some looking for a lower cost of living and retirement, others to go to school or professional reasons. But whatever the reason happens to be, it's not like you're stuck. It's not like it's a one-way ticket to wherever it is that you're going. Even if you're buying a one-way ticket, there's no reason why you can't move back again. And when we started this podcast series about 3 years ago, I believe it was early 2022, at that time, I remember asking some of the people who worked at SDC International Shipping, I said, have you ever moved people out of the United States only to move them back again several years down the line? And they told me absolutely. There were many instances of people that went maybe for a work promotion and they worked overseas for several years and then they had another opening here in the United States and they decided to move back. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that you might decide to live temporarily in another country. Sometimes it's just for the experience itself. And there are reasons, good reasons why people move back. Matter of fact, I recently heard a young woman in a video talking about that she was an international travel blogger, and I believe she started very young and spent a decade of her life traveling from country to country to country, writing her blog as a digital nomad. And as she was entering her late 20s, I don't know if it was her grandmother or one of her grandparents passed away. And so she returned here to the United States. And upon her return, it suddenly occurred to her that these people her family members weren't going to be in her life forever. And while she was out chasing adventure in another country, which there's nothing wrong with that, she realized what she was missing here in the United States in terms of family and how those memories and relationships are like anything else. I mean, for example, oftentimes when I hear people go away for a long period of time, I compare that to myself and I think, well, what if I were gone for that length of time? How would it have affected me personally? Now, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anyone else, but I had great relationships with people in my family. I can think of all the holidays we've spent together and just little things like going out to eat once a week and Sunday dinners and all of this. I come from an Italian-American family where, family, immediate family especially, is very important. And you spend time together. And then you're there in later years to help your parents as they get older. You want to make sure that you're close to them or they're close to you. So if I took 10 years, I'm looking back now, of the time that I spent with loved ones and erase those years and replace them with, living the life of a digital nomad, I could see where, looking back on, if I had to choose A and B, I would have chosen to spend the time with them. Now, I can say that from the vantage point of years later down the line, having already experienced those memories. But this young lady was talking about that experience in terms of, although she loved what she did, she also loved her family and decided she needed a better balance. And so she decided to return here to the United States to spend time here with certain older members of the family while they were still around and enjoy some time with them. So you can see it varies from one individual to the next, but you can understand why sometimes people would want to return to the U.S. after having lived in another country for a while, away from family, friends, and loved ones. So we're going to talk about that today, because you do hear plenty of stories about people living abroad and what it's like and all the reasons why. But also I want to talk about what countries people are moving back from, according to things that I've heard and read online. And I want to talk about Mexico too, because Mexico happened to be one of those places that I recently heard an American woman talking about moving back here to the United States from Mexico after having spent a little over 3 years there. And so I'll be speaking from my own perspective. I'll challenge you to look at it from your perspective, and we'll use another person's real life experiences for examples of what can ultimately drive this decision. The good news is, if you move with a reputable international moving company like STC International Shipping, we're here for the long term. You can pick up that phone, you can call us, and you can say, "Hey, I need to come home. Can you help me set everything up?" They'll have everything in place to help you make that journey back here to the United States, just like you made it from here to there. Stress-free, reliable. And when we talk about Mexico, of course, we're not talking about that far away. I just happened to pick Mexico because it was close, and I know a lot of people from the United States have been moving there over the years due to things like lower cost of living, different culture, and things like that. Okay, so it's important to understand, if we look at, I don't know if we can call this a trend or not yet. Maybe it's a trend for a certain number of expats after so many years. I don't have enough information about that. So, but I do want to say this. Moving back to the United States after living abroad isn't necessarily about giving up or failing at the expat life. In many cases, as we've already talked about, it's simply about reorganizing your priorities, your needs, and maybe even your lifestyle has changed a little bit, and that's completely normal. It's the reason why people move from state to state or within a state. A lot of people live in California and Florida. I'm just using these two examples because I know people in both locations. They love the warm weather, but there's certain things about the location that they're in that they don't exactly love, and so they may relocate to another location in the same state so they don't have to deal with certain things. Maybe their lifestyles change, and that's completely normal. But you do see reports over the years that show there are patterns of people returning from places like, we're talking about the United States, so let's just talk about, for the sake of today's episode, expats from the U.S. who are returning back from the U.S. You can see certain patterns from places like the U.K., Spain, Australia, and Mexico. So each country attracts Americans for its own reason, but each also has its challenges that can, over time, influence a decision to come back. Okay, take the UK for example. Many Americans are drawn there because, number one, there's no language barrier. The culture feels familiar. The history, to a lot of people, is fascinating. But the cost of living, especially in cities like London, can be incredibly high. Combine that with the frequent gray skies, the long, damp winters, and some, after X number of years, decide that they would rather return to the United States. I understand all the above. Australia is another destination that lures Americans to its shores with, sunshine, beaches, and a laid-back way of life. But there is a catch. It's far away, very far away. And that distance means expensive trips back to see family, and the time zone difference makes it maybe a little more difficult staying in touch with loved ones. There's a bit of a challenge there. And then we can look at countries like Spain. It just so happens I know people living in all of the countries that I'm talking about now. Spain offers warmth, the beautiful Mediterranean, slower pace of life. But on the other hand, the bureaucracy can be frustrating. Language barriers can persist even after years. Job opportunities for non-EU citizens can be somewhat limited. And then there's Mexico, close to home, more affordable in many ways, rich in culture, history, cuisine. Mexico is often the first place Americans think about when considering an overseas move. But for many, yes, it's a wonderful experience, but for some, everyday realities become harder, more difficult to manage over time. So let's talk a little bit about Mexico. Let's focus on one real-life example that really captures, I believe, the mix of emotions and realities that come with living abroad in general. Okay, so recently I watched a video, and a woman from the United States made this video talking about her return. This is the second video I've watched just this week about people returning. One was returning from Mexico, one somewhere in Europe. And this woman, younger woman, I would say in her 30s, wanted something different. She wanted a fresh start in a place with a warmer climate, slower pace of life, a chance to experience a vibrant culture up close. And the appeal is clear. The colorful markets, the bursting with the fresh produce, beautiful architecture, lively music in the streets, cost of living that's far more manageable than in many parts of the United States. And she was talking about this, all the beautiful things. And so for the first year or so, she embraced all of it. She built her own new routine that included shopping at local markets, learning to cook with local ingredients, practicing Spanish with her neighbors, enjoying evenings on her balcony, watching the sunsets. The slower pace of life, she said, felt like a relief after years of fast-paced living in the United States. But as time passed, challenges began to surface, not all at once, but little by little. So, for instance, safety was beginning to become more of a constant consideration to her. And she said it wasn't that she was living in fear every day. It was that certain things she was noticing that she hadn't noticed before, and these things were causing her to become more cautious, more aware of her surroundings, not as relaxed when she was going out. Stories of crime, both petty and more serious, began to circulate in the community, and her own interactions, even with the local police, left her feeling uneasy. She made some comments about the police, which was very interesting because the police oftentimes took advantage of their position, not only as having a place of authority, but also in, I don't know if extortion would be the right word, but if you don't want to get arrested or you want to avoid a hassle, it often involved, especially if you were going too fast or something like that, maybe driving, you would pay them off right there on the street. Now, that kind of thing usually doesn't happen here in the United States, but she also said the police were inconsistent when it came to helping people, especially if you were American. So, now that wasn't everything, but she was basically saying that the police were unpredictable when it came to reliability or even enforcing the law at times. And the sense that being a foreigner, on top of that, made her feel more vulnerable. And she said a layer of stress began to form around her that never fully went away. Then she talked about the cost of living. She said as time went on, it was cheaper in some ways, but over time she realized it wasn't the bargain she was hoping for. She said in a lot of ways the influx of expats were driving up the prices of food. In other ways, in the marketplaces, local vendors would charge her more, recognizing her as an American. They would want her to pay more for the same things they were selling to other people for less. and they would haggle about that. She even had told the story of going into a restaurant, getting a menu, ordering something, and then being charged almost twice as much. And when she complained about it and asked to see the menu to point out the prices, they brought out a second menu that had higher prices on it. And that's when she realized that these were new forming problems, and that life had turned the corner and was heading in a different direction. This was becoming a different Mexico than the Mexico she had moved to 3 years earlier. Now, a lot of this has to do, again, with, I don't want to call it mass migration, but enough people have migrated from the United States to certain sections of Mexico. Now, Mexico City is one of the biggest cities in the world, and so it becoming even bigger with more Americans moving there. And then there was other parts of Mexico that we could look at, like near the Gulf, for example, and places where it would be more touristy, but the prices are also increasing there because of more American expats, UK expats from all over the world moving there for the reasons we stated earlier. And the people who grew up there can't even afford housing any longer. They can't afford rent because of gentrification. That's the technical word for it. I experienced that where I grew up, where my generation could no longer afford to buy a home where we grew up, and so we had to move to the southern part of New Jersey. I've seen it happen here, and I've seen it happen here in the state of Florida. It's happened in California. It's happened in many places where, especially today, where with how quickly information can travel online, all it takes is 12 months worth of articles, people talking about how great it is to live in a certain place. Fast forward 24 months later, it's not so great there because so many people have moved there. Here in the United States, Asheville, North Carolina is one such place. Totally different place than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. And so she was experiencing this happening there. Certain expenses, the goods and the services aimed at the expat community were high. Prices were going up for everything. She found herself paying more for things, and little things also. Reliable internet. The internet wasn't quite as reliable. The infrastructure was kind of buckling. There were water shortages actually too. I think Mexico is one of those places that had issues with water. And also one of the things about water, there used to be jokes about water in many countries, not to drink the water there. Everybody I know that travels around the world says the same thing. Never drink tap water in another country because it has elements in it that your body isn't used to, that the locals are used to, and you can get deathly sick by drinking the water. Drink bottled water. Never ask for ice because usually the ice is made with tap water and you'll get those same things in your body. But she was saying that most of the people there are drinking bottled water or purified water, and they're using that also for drinking and cooking. And so that the cost adds up with that. And she said with the water, it requires constant planning. There was a point, I think, where the water would turn off at certain sections of town on certain times of the day. Excuse me. A low water pressure. And she says all of the minerals, the water is so hard there, she was also beginning to experiencing problems with her skin. Noise was another thing that was very frustrating. She said that in many towns and cities, celebrations, music, fireworks, and even construction can happen at all hours of the day or night. And it's not against the law there. There aren't any noise ordinances in place. And while it's part of the culture and something many locals don't mind, for someone who values peace and quiet, it can be a little hard to adjust to. She said it took her a long time. Even though she never completely adjusted to it, she said the first year was the worst. And she said, she was looking at all of these things. She said it wasn't any one thing that was the decision maker. It was the culmination or adding up of all of these things over time. And she said that while she still loved aspects of life in Mexico, the food, the friendships, the scenery, she began to realize right about the 3 year point, that she missed the sense of ease that she had in the United States. She missed knowing exactly how all of the systems worked. She missed being close to her family. She missed the convenience of having many of life's necessities just a phone call or a short drive away. And so, after about 3.5 years, she made the decision to move back. Not because she hated Mexico, far from it. She said she left with gratitude for the experience, but she also left with a clear understanding that for her, the best quality of life was going to be back here in the United States. Now let's look at some of the common reasons that expats return. Let's look at that for a minute, because her reasons for moving back are not unique. In fact, they are basically echoed by most of the Americans who have lived abroad and eventually decide to return home. And while every story is personal, certain themes come up again and again. Things like a breakdown of safety. We see it happening in big cities overseas now. Family, healthcare, the infrastructure, cultural fit, and economic changes. All of those things have changed how we look at and what we're experiencing in other countries. I personally remember reading about London about 10, 15 years ago now, and wanting to visit there and thinking about the London of old, what London used to be like. And over the years, I've seen there have been quite a few changes to that city, sort of like New York. A lot of changes have happened there. Last time I was in New York was probably about 15 years ago, but it was much safer 15 years ago than it is today. And the same thing goes for London. Not only is London more expensive than ever, and New York, and Los Angeles, I guess we could say that about every big city, the prices have risen for certain things exponentially over that time. But the sense of safety and security is probably less in all of these places today than it has been in the past. Safety is a big concern today, and especially if you're a foreigner. Sometimes foreigners are targeted. So living in a place where you have to constantly think about your surroundings can become mentally wearing over time. Family, of course, when we started today's episode, that was one of the first things we were talking about. But many people move abroad during a stage of life where they're focused on adventure, new experiences. But as time passes, the desire to be near aging parents, or maybe in some other cases, grown children or grandchildren, can outweigh the excitement of living overseas. Healthcare is another factor. Even in countries with excellent healthcare systems, navigating them as a foreigner can be confusing to a lot of people. And some expats miss the familiarity of the U.S. healthcare system, their existing doctors, or the ability to get certain treatments easier. Infrastructure is one of the things we talked about. Unreliable utilities, internet, transportation systems can be a minor annoyance at first, but over the years they can grow to be major frustrations. The cultural fit is a subtle thing, but another powerful influence. You may love a country's culture, but still find it challenging to fully adapt to local customs, communication styles, or even pace of life. The economic changes, of course, we've seen economic changes throughout the world over the past several years. The place that was affordable when you move there may not stay that way. I mean, I look at where I am right now. The house we're living in is valued at twice the amount it was purchased for. And although that's great when you look at your house as an investment, you can't see your house as just an investment, because you're still, no matter where you go, you're going to need a place to live. And so if you bought your house for $200,000 and you sold it down the line for, I don't know, $800,000, let's say, because you live in an area where the prices have just exploded, then it really doesn't do you much good if buying another house is going to cost that same amount. In other words, you're not making any money. You only make money when you sell what you bought, or you buy new for a lower amount, right? When you buy cash. That was how people used to retire all the time. They would live in one place. They would buy a house back in the day for, I don't know, let's just even number $100,000, and then they would sell it for $400,000 and move to a place like Florida here in the United States or somewhere else, and they'd buy a house for cash and then have a few $100,000 left over sitting in the bank. It's not that way anymore. It's not that way, unfortunately, in many places. So let's finish by talking about how SDC International Shipping can help you not just move to wherever you want to go to, but also can help you move back. So deciding to return is one thing. Making the move, if you're living overseas, especially, let's talk about Mexico. If you're preparing to relocate back to the U.S., and you're looking from Mexico to the U.S., the logistics can be a little bit challenging if you're talking to moving companies there. You might have a house full of belongings, vehicles, even specialty items like artwork or antiques that you've acquired, and you might need professional packing, custom crating, all of those things. That's where SDC International Shipping comes in. We've helped countless American expats make that transition back home again. And also, we're talking about Mexico right now. Our home office being based in Mexico gives us an additional strategic advantage for moves from Mexico back here to the United States. We're close enough to coordinate efficiently, yet equipped to handle the full scope of an international relocation. SDC International Shipping offers complete door-to-door service, and that means your belongings will be picked up and you're at your home, whether you're in Mexico or somewhere else. Everything will be professionally packed and secured. All of the customs clearance process will be handled, and everything will be delivered safely to your new home back here in the United States. The teams are trained to treat your possessions with the utmost of care, whether it's everyday furniture or items that need special handling. So from the moment you decide to return, we will work with you to create a moving plan that's tailored to your situation, to your budget, and to your timeline. You'll have a dedicated relocation specialist who keeps you updated and answers any of your questions along the way. And just so you know, if you want to reach out to a relocation specialist today and get some fast answers to some of your questions, don't hesitate to do so. You can reach us directly toll-free at 877-339-0267. That's 877-339-0267. So coming back to the United States after living abroad is, again, another major life transition. There's an emotional component. It's exciting. Sometimes there's feelings of it being a bit bittersweet, because you're not just changing locations, you're shifting lifestyles, routines, and relationships again. With SDC International Shipping, you can focus on the emotional side of the move while we handle the logistics. We've done it for others, and we can do it for you too, whether you're returning from Mexico, Europe, Asia, or anywhere else in the world. So when you're ready to make that move, visit our main website at sdcinternationalshipping.com to learn more, or give us a call again at 877-339-0267. One last thing, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd be grateful if you shared it with friends, family, or anyone living abroad who might be thinking about making an international move. Our website is available with a lot of fantastic information at sdcinternationalshipping.com, all things pertaining to international moving. We do have some specialty sites also. I'll mention them to you quickly. If you're heading to Australia, we have movers2australia.com. If you're heading to Spain, movertospain.com. And if you're heading to the UK, movefromusa2uk.com. That's movefromusa2uk.com. These are our specialty websites because we have so many people looking to move to these specific locations. So whether you're looking to move to there from the United States, or whether you're looking to move from another country here or anywhere else, we're here to help you from start to finish. And as I was saying, at our website, you'll also find links to our YouTube channel, our Instagram page, all of that, social media, it's all there. Okay, so thanks for joining me for this episode of the International Moving Podcast. I'm Jim. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in my next episode.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening.
Whether you're relocating within the country or moving to the other side of the world, we're here to help from start to finish. Connect with us today at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962.